Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Technical Critic, and it's time for my review of not just the Hunger Games, but the entire Hunger Games saga. And yes, this is a saga because unlike Candy Crush, it comes in 4 parts or more. Now, this review has been a long time in coming, and to be honest, I'm glad I waited to watch all of these movies at once. And just in case you're wondering, I did not watch any of the previous films prior to Mockingjay Part 2, or read the books prior to okay, let me clarify that. I did read the books, but it was so long ago that I'm familiar with the story. I could give you the general plot thread of it, but if you ask me for specific details, I couldn't tell you, right? If you said, what happened to Rue or Katniss or whoever, right? In this, I'd be like, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't remember, right? And just on top of that, to make sure that all of the bases are covered, I did not watch the series in order. I watched it in reverse, as I do with all the series that I am planning on reviewing. Now, a lot of you are going, why in the world would you ever do that? Well, allow me to explain. If you watch a film series from start to finish, for example, The Lord of the Rings, or for God's sakes, do not do this, the Star Wars trilogy, you start comparing one movie to the other in order of what you saw last. And this is why people complain so bitterly about some movies. Let's take the James Bond film, for example. The first one and the third one, everybody raved about. The second and the fourth one, they were ranting. And the reason for this is because they are perpetually stuck in a pendulum between the first film and the last film, and then the next film and the film that comes after that. And it forces them to go good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, without any actual objective criticism. However, when you watch them backwards, right, or you just watch them as an anthology series, it forces your brain to view each film as a one-off. And it only makes sense when you put it together all at once. Well, I should say, it still makes sense when you put it together, just like an anthology. It still makes sense when you put it all together, but it allows you to keep your objectivity. So in essence, your brain is able to cobble the entire story together after it's seen the first part, and you get a general understanding. It would be like reading the books in reverse. You know the story before it happens, but then everything that happens, you understand why it happens, and you understand it better. So, without further ado, here are my thoughts on the Hunger Games franchise, and we're going to start in reverse order because this is who I am. Mockingjay Part 2 is a faithful, fully faithful adaptation of the third book. But on top of that, it has these awesome annotations to show you what was going on behind the scenes. Now I know what you're saying, but didn't you just say that you don't remember any of the details of the book? No, I didn't. But as I watched it, I did. So take that. And to be quite honest, watching these power plays as they happen between characters, watching the interactions, and then watching what happens after the interactions, cleared up a lot of the ambiguity that the book series had, and allowed you to view the motivations of all of the characters in power. So let's take President Snow, President Coin, the people who are making the propos, everybody. If you just get to see what everybody's agenda is, and it not only gives the film an excellent sense of pacing, it gives it a good sense of story because you get to see what happens from both sides and allows you to develop the characters. Let's take President Coin for an example. In the books, I know I'm comparing the books to the movie, I'm sinning, but bear with me. In the books, President Coin is not much of a character. She's very hard to read. And there's a lot of stuff ambiguous about her character. She's basically there to make statements, and then for Katniss Everdeen to react against, and then she counter-reacts to whatever Katniss has said, and ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. And there's a lot of ambiguity as to why Katniss does what she does in the face of President Coin, and it's clearly the author knows what's happening in the background, but you, the reader, never get to see that. So you never understand any of the auxiliary characters' motivations. However, in this movie, it's only like 3 or 4 scenes that President Coin has on her own. But with those 3 or 4 scenes, you get to see, 1, who this character is, 2, why they're doing what they're doing, and then 3, what they do on their own in a particular situation and how they handle themselves. And if you're going to understand a character, that is key. Seeing how a character not just handles themselves in the presence of others, but when the others have left the room, is critical if you're going to understand why a character does what they do. And that happens with President Coin, President Snow, both of her love interests, everything. Ah, so good, so good, so good. This is me fangirling, guys. I know you've seen it like once or twice and you're like, you're not fangirling very hard. No, believe me. If you've ever seen me fangirl over something, this is me going, eee! This is that equivalent, right? Go back to my Sherlock Holmes review. You'll see exactly what I just did. And on top of that, there's the inclusion of so many characters from the Game of Thrones universe. And I thought that was a nice touch. You get to see Brienne of Tarth as a rebel commander, or Marjorie Tyrell as a director / bodyguard / possible love interest for Jennifer Lawrence, which was amusing to say the least. And to be quite honest, I wouldn't mind seeing some of the people who appeared in this film appear in Game of Thrones. And speaking on the topic of sexual tension, let's move on to the love story. Blah! Now, anybody who's here on my channel knows that I despise love stories, okay? If I could find the people who are responsible for Love Actually and bury them alive, I would feel that is a positive response. I would. No questions asked. Because I hate that film. Because I hate love stories. I can't stand them. And the relationship aspect of this film are no less painful than Love Actually, to say the least. Peeta is the most useless main character I've ever seen outside of Bolin from Legend of Korra. I cannot think of a character that is this useless. I have seen so many films. The only thing that I can compare it to is when I was in grade 7. They forced us to go and see some play about drugs, and every other character in that film, or that play, was useless to the point of I wrote an essay afterwards about, they said, what did you like about the film? And I said, I like the fact that one of the characters looks like a person who I knew in a town that I moved from 2 years ago, and reminded me that, hey, not all your friends are here in, the new place you are. Sad. That's the level of uselessness I'm talking about, right? That is Peeta's level of uselessness. Honestly, the arc of his character should have been cut out for most of the time. You could have removed him from the middle of the film and saved just so much in terms of pacing and wasted time. I mean, there's a fully fleshed out 10-minute scene where they're trying to restore Peeta's memory by taking him out and talking to him about, his favorite colors and things he did. And honestly, stuff that didn't matter to anyone. Stuff that you wouldn't remember. And as to Gale, oh god, look. Gale is ambiguous as far as the books are concerned as love interest. He's in, he's out, he's in, he's out. But in this film, you can tell he clearly wants to nail Katniss, right? It's a theme that carries through the majority of it. And he has so many opportunities to do so, but he just doesn't take them because he's either being too selfishly emo to recognize a woman who wants him inside her, or he just doesn't care. It is bullshit. It was bullshit to say the least. But in the end, he blew it. literally by killing her sister and then admitting it without admitting it to Katniss's face, just like in the books. I don't. This is where I'm conflicted. On the one point, it's faithful to the books. The adaptation is perfectly flawless, right? Every line for line, scene for scene, what happened there. And image-wise, it's even more clear because you see he's like, I still want to bang you, but I have to admit that I killed your sister, but I don't want to admit I killed your sister. And then Jennifer Lawrence basically tells him, you know what, you could fuck off for the rest of my life and I don't care. Go shoot yourself. I literally don't care. And it's a good scene, right? It's a very good scene. It's very well acted. It's faithful to the books. I just hate it. I just hated the stupidity of it. The sheer stupidity of it. However, this movie is not all about girls and boys, so let's talk about the girl-on-girl action. And yes, there is girl-on-girl action because there is some very heavy sexual tension in this film. Specifically between Joanne and Katniss, which for some reason was never fully explained. Perhaps I was reading too much into it, but every scene where they were together, it felt like Joanna, for those of you who do not know, or who don't remember, she is the axe girl. She's the lumberjack from District whatever, where they cut trees. I think it's District 6. And basically, she throughout the series was basically Katniss's bodyguard. She saves a couple of people for her, and then when they take Katniss to District 13, she gets left behind. They torture her with some water, and then they rescue her and bring her back. And then, there's a couple of scenes with her in the books, but there's nothing really there. She appears a couple times to make a vote, or to do a thing, or to train for something, but other than that, there's not much use, right? However, in this one, I don't know why, but it felt like Joanna wanted to hold Katniss down and fist her passionately for what had happened to her in the previous films. And to be quite honest, Joanna is a fairly sexual character in the previous film, so it makes sense that it was included in this particular final cut. But it lent an underlying tension to the film that made it seem like there was a lot more going on off-screen and off-set that we would not get to see on celluloid. It's helped by the fact, I will say this, it's helped by the fact that Joanna and Katniss look to be about the same age in this film, despite her being 30 in the books. But if you're a writer of fan fiction, and I know that there are a lot of writers of fan fiction out there, including myself, this movie is just full of material for you, and as I'm sure you are very pleased to hear if you haven't seen it already. And finally, let's talk about the film itself. This film, as I mentioned before, briefly, is beautifully shot. There is exactly one use of shaky cam, and it is inappropriate. However, it only happens one time, and because of that, I'll let it slide. The very opening scene made me laugh my ass off at the discontinuity. Katniss, from her last film, had her neck injured and can barely speak. However, and there's a full set of scenes devoted to it. She's talking like this. She can barely speak. It's raspy. But then they take her to go and see Peeta. And then they send in her sister, and she doesn't say anything the entire time. However, in the next scene right after that, her voice is fine, right? And I can understand why they did it, right? It's first she goes, I want to see Peeta, and then they take her to see Peeta, and then the entire scene happens in the space of maybe 15 minutes, right? Nobody heals like that in 15 minutes, but I can understand why they did it. Saying, that's not Peeta, in a raspy voice is not nearly as dramatic as hearing, that's not Peeta, in that commanding voice that Jennifer Lawrence can have when she really wants to. So again, I'm willing to give it a pass, just for the sheer ballsiness of the artistic direction there. The rest of the film is paced beautifully. My hatred for love stories made the scenes where the characters are discussing their feelings seem overly long. But, personal preference aside, none of these scenes ran longer than they needed to, right? There was no ongoing necessity for this. The building of tension as well as the sheer surprise was phenomenal. There's a scene underground where you, the audience member, is expecting to get a cheap jump scare, as many movies would have. However, the sheer length of time from when they start building the tension to the payoff makes me want to kiss the cinematographer on the mouth. I loved every minute of that sequence. I could feel my not since Strangers on it. There's only one film in which I felt that level of tension. It is Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. I could feel my anxiety ratcheting up as the audience's anxiety was ratcheting up. Not just to the buildup of the reveal, but through the entire battle scene and ultimately the death of so many characters. It was, look, it was Game of, it was, this is the closest that you were going to get to a Game of Thrones movie. I'm going to say that first off, because they're willing to kill just anybody. And on top of that, and it doesn't matter who they are. Finnick, he just got married to the woman he loved. Death in the sewers. By explosion, no less. By the hand of Katniss Everdeen. Oh my god, I can't. It's so good. It's so good. Do not watch that scene by yourself. Please, I beg you. Get as many, if you're going to watch The Hunger Games Part 2, Mockingjay Part 2, get as many friends as you can. And then just turn all the lights off and watch the movie. And the scene in the sewer, and I don't think this is a spoiler at this point, because it's been out for a couple of weeks. You've seen it. There's a scene where they're in the sewers. They're sending mutts after them, and it's human mutts, right? They're like a cross between, oh gosh, how would that? They're like a cross between the zombies from 28 Days Later and the Bell Dam from Pan's Labyrinth. That's the best. That's the best description I can come up with for them. So they hear these things coming, and they hear these things coming. They're like, "We have to go now," and you think, "Oh my God, they're right behind them. It's gonna break out into a battle scene any minute." No. Despite the fact that the time between the beginning of the scene and the end where the mutts finally show up is probably no more than 3 minutes, the amount of ground that they cover in those 3 minutes to ratchet up your anxiety, the sheer amount of scenes that they squeeze into that sequence to build up the tension is amazing. You walk down the hall. Nothing. You shine the light in a little hole. Nothing. You walk down another hall filled with water. Nothing. You can still hear them in the background. You can still hear what they're saying. The technical producer, she caught this. I didn't. She heard that what the mutts were whispering was Katniss's name. I didn't hear it because I'm deaf as a post. But apparently, and this is apparently true in the books too. I didn't read them before, but what the mutts were whispering, the sound that you hear in the background as the mutts are coming, it's Katniss's name. And you hear that in the background right up until the mutts are about to attack. Suddenly it all goes quiet. And they're trying to get through a hole in a wall, and they're shining the lights backwards to make sure the mutts aren't coming. Nothing. They keep people going through, and they keep shining the light backwards to show you, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's only when the last person is ready to go through, bam, they show up, and you're like, ah! It's, oh my God. It's so good. It's so good. It builds up the tension, and then it's willing to start killing off important characters, like right there. Oh. That is wonderful. It is probably the best sequence I've seen in a modern film in a very, very long time. Oh man, and I hate scary movies, right? There are two things I hate: love stories and scary movies. That was awesome. But moving on. Yes, there's more to do. You feel like the main character can bite at any moment through not just that scene, but through all the scenes. And despite knowing that there's a film to finish, it is the sign of highest quality of filmmaking when you feel that your main character can die at any moment, despite the fact that you know that they make it to the end. Oh, and the designs of this film are amazing. Just the people of the Capitol and how crazy looking they are is phenomenal, as well as the backdrops and the settings and the traps and everything in this film. The cinematography is perfect. I know it's not going to happen. I want this film nominated for an Academy Award for cinematography because everything feels unique. And the mixture of practical sets with the CGI background is noticeable, but it's not awful. It's not. It's not Jurassic Park. It's not Jurassic World awful, right? It's, you know what? We have a grand giant scene. Let's build some of the sets and then just do the background. It's like, you know what? Fine. I'm cool with that. You need to shave off a couple $1 million here and there. That's fine. I don't mind. You want to get this film done in time for next year. Okay, good. It's not a problem. So that's Mockingjay Part 2. If I have to rate it as a film, you know what? This one's going to get 12 out of 12. Despite the fact that it has horrible love stories in it, this one gets a 12 out of 12. Whew! And I do not award 12 out of 12 lightly, my friends. You know that. Now, as to Mockingjay Part 1. I heard this movie get shit on by critic after critic after critic last year for its poor pacing and its pointless scenes where nothing happens, or that the tension was input just for the sake of tension. And while it is the case that there are several points in this movie where the story builds up scenes deliberately, it's not outside the canon of the series. The only example I can think of where the action scene is prolonged is where Primrose needs to get her cat when the Capitol is bombing District 13 and everybody's fleeing into the bunkers. They make a big deal out of her needing to go get her cat. Katniss and it's basically a race to safety before Katniss, and for some reason Gale end up getting sealed outside the bunker. But everything else is pretty much faithful to the adaptation so far as I can remember. And beyond that, like Part 2, it takes time to show both sides of everything evenly. Not just what she's doing, not just what Katniss observes, to get a fuller view and flesh out the story. Again, there's a lot of wasted opportunities to bring Katniss and Gale together, but that only speaks to the ineptness of his character. And overall, the film, it's a minute flaw, right, in a very, very good film. Part 1 is designed more like a pre-war build-up. It's a showdown, basically, of rhetoric, and it goes to painstaking lengths to illustrate this, but it does it well, I will say that. Despite the fact that this movie could have gotten exquisitely preachy, it did not. It's a propaganda movie, right? You have to watch it with that in mind, right? You have to realize, oh, you're watching a propaganda movie where propaganda is being made, and then accept it for that. And again, this movie is very well paced to the point where it feels like you needed 2 movies to showcase everything that this final chapter is trying to illustrate. Just how both sides are ruthlessly opposed to the point where they're practically identical to one another. They use the same techniques, same framing devices, same setup scenarios. It's as a precursor to the setup, it's basically setting up the chess pieces. The film just fulfills the duty of showing us that there's more to the agenda that meets the eye. I'm trying my best to describe this, but it's difficult, right? Because it's difficult to pinpoint exactly the function, but it's meant to set up the chess pieces for us, right? So that we can have just a runaway film for part 2. And that being said, there are many awkward scenes in this film. The playing with the cat, the filming of the propos, all of it feels clunky, but it's clunky by design, okay? It's meant to show how the main character is not a perfect character. That she will not perform like the protagonist of a video game where everything is gotten right or it's immediately game over. That basically flawless execution that you see in kill after kill after kill. No, it sets Katniss up as a person who happens to be in a situation that requires her to be a hero. And it just shows how all of those around her help to bridge those gaps in order to make her into the symbol everyone needs her to be. It's very political if you think about it, right? It's like saying, okay, here's the president, right? Yeah, sure, he's the president, but he's not the president just on his own. He wasn't born in an American flag. Or if you're Canadian like me, the Prime Minister was not born wrapped in a maple leaf, as you are typically led to believe. No. There is an entire team of people behind them making this inherently flawed, generic person into the kind of thing that you would vote for come election time. Otherwise than that, the pacing is fine. As a film, it's good. It's competent, it's even. But you didn't hear that from me, okay? I'd like to keep my critic's license. You didn't hear from me that it's competent and even, alright? If I had to rate it, 10 out of 12. Again, the clunky scenes are still clunky, right? They're clunky. But overall, not bad. 10 out of 12, fairly good. Hey, that's like an 80%, so you know me, I'm a hard marker. Hunger Games Part 2, Catching Fire, is, or was, acclaimed as the best film of the entire franchise when it originally came out. And you know what? They're right. It is probably the best film of this entire franchise. The critics got it right. Surprise, surprise. This is a film about warriors, and most importantly of all, it takes the time to develop their characters into meaningful, interesting people, and do it in meaningful, interesting ways. It may seem like there's a lot of throwaway scenes or needless action montages, but every scene that the film puts forth is meant to show how these characters are and why you should be on their side. It made me like Finnick, a character that is in the third and fourth films that I otherwise didn't care for simply because he was a side note romantic third fiddle to a girl that we barely had any time knowing. I mean, quite honestly, I didn't care for Finnick, and when he died, I cheered, and much to TP's horror. And while I still find him contemptible, I find him more noble than before watching the second film. And honestly, as much as I liked Joanne in the fourth film, just for all the tension that was there, I love her more now that I've seen the second film because it confirmed how badly she wanted to hate fuck Katniss in the last film. She is an axe-wielding badass that was forced to take a dive and is pissed off because of it. I am not making this up. I watched the fourth film in theaters, and about halfway through their scenes together, I turned to TP, and I told her, I wish they'd just kiss each other already. I've never seen anyone want to hate fuck another person that badly since Orange is the New Black, and she agreed with me. TP, the conservative one, she agreed with me. You know what? Yeah, they should just get it over with. And if the character development of the last two films was great, the second film's character development was awesome! Again, they used that two-sided view to make the ambiguity clear, and it works in the favor of the audience to explain what is happening. There's an old thing in movies, it's called show, don't tell. This movie is so good at showing and not telling. While the story could rely on... While a story in a book relies on nuance to keep the reader guessing and to keep thinking, well, you know what, this hasn't been explained in this chapter, maybe in the next chapter. A film doesn't have the luxury of having 25 parts, okay, or being as long as it wishes. You can put 500 pages into 7 books, and you're good, right? The cuts that were made, at least those that I noticed, to the story were very few, and honestly, it streamlined this movie in a way that was similar to the original book, so much so that the reader could probably follow along, but adapted in a way that not everything in the book was deemed necessary. And again, this is a beautiful film. The vibrant colors of the tropical arena and just the sheer brilliance of the set design was astonishing. I know it's all CGI and green screens, but even so, it looked good to the point where I didn't care, and honestly, I still don't. I barely noticed the CGI. I was amazed and I loved it. The pacing of this film was fantastic and frantic, right? Frantic is the only word to describe it, but in a way that was smooth, right? It transitioned smoothly from scene to scene to scene, and it's rare that I see cinematography done this well, and I simply could not be happier about it. I know I promised an objective review, but honestly, guys, there is nothing to nitpick at. There is nothing for me to say, this was bad, this could have been improved, this was awful here. No, this is an example of filmmaking done well. You want YA stories? Fine. I have no problem with YA stories. My problem with YA, in terms of movies, comes from when the story is dragged out for the sake of simply putting butts in seats and making more money than godly possible, and just awfulness. But this one actually felt. This actually felt like it deserved every single bit of praise it got, and the hate was I don't see it. I honestly don't. And now, to quote Winston Churchill, we come to the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end, because now is the first Hunger Games film. The first Hunger Games film, by far, is the weakest of the 4. And that's saying something, because despite all the problems that this film had, it's more than a decent movie. Unfortunately, there's so much in terms of side story that the first book uses to give you an idea of, one, who the character you're dealing with is, or who the characters more depthly are, that the first movie simply couldn't keep up, and the cuts that were introduced to Katniss in the Reaping makes it feel choppy to the point where it left Gale, Peeta, and Kat underdeveloped. Now I know that they take time later on in the films to get that all well and good, but if you're going to make a movie, especially one that's supposed to grab people and force them through a franchise, you don't want to undersell your main characters. Never, 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 never undersell your main characters by simply cutting for time. You know nothing about this character until a lot later on in the film. And by then it's too late. The film was built, this film especially, it feels more like a generic YA. It was built especially for book readers. And if you hadn't read the story, you could still generally follow along. However, the deployment of scenes to build up who your characters were and why you should feel sorry for them as they enter the Hunger Games, that's lacking. Because you don't know what the Hunger Games... You do, but you don't. You don't know what the devastation of the Hunger Games is. You see that clearly the people are reacting to it, but as to what it is, it's just not there. It's almost like you need a bigger introductory scene to what the Hunger Games were before you even started going into how people react to the Hunger Games. It was so much so that you had to wait for scenes between Katniss and Rue to determine what the relationship between Katniss and her sister was probably like. And that's why she's willing to volunteer herself up for the Hunger Games in her place, when literally no one else was willing to do it for the members of their own family. I mean, They even mentioned in the book, volunteers are so rare outside of Districts 1 and 2 that it's practically unheard of, right? So really, it needed more of that. You needed that kernel there to start everything off. Now, Hunger Games Part 1 is a film which does need to be rewatched. Okay, I'm going to state that right now. It's a film that needs to be rewatched in order to understand it. I mean, as a first film in a series, it does its job. Okay, let's put it that way. It's meant to set up the world in which the next films are going to flourish in, right? And that being said, as I watched these films in reverse order, I was still able to understand why the Capitol was the way it was. Despite it not being front loaded in the first film and dropped in the third, right? In many ways, this series is similar to Adventure Time, right? Where you don't get to see everything about the characters in 1 or 2 episodes, but overall, as the characters grow and as you get to know them, they grow, they change, and they remember. You get drawn in. That's how I would characterize a set of movies, right? As a whole. The 4 films together work as an anthology series. You can literally pick these films up anywhere in the series and still understand the general meaning of what's going on and everything else that's happening in the world fairly easily, right? Watching the 4th film first, I still knew everything that was happening. Even if I hadn't been a book reader, I could still tell you, okay, clearly they're fighting a rebellion, and I want to know what happens prior to this. It's almost as if the first 3 films are prequels to the 4th one. I know that the word prequel is a dangerous word, especially when we're talking about movies, but quite frankly, that's the way it's set up, right? Now, watching the first film overall, it didn't add anything to the story further on, but it is still fairly entertaining as a concept, and as such, it was a decent film to watch. Downright enjoyable at some points, I would say. There are several pitfalls, but they seem small, like very small, and they don't subtract too much from the story. Honestly, it's a straightforward adaptation. There's a little bit of that duality there once they reach the Capitol and you see what one side's doing to the other and why everyone's targeting Katniss. Yeah, but it's not to the extent in the other 3 films to where it becomes a necessary tool. Honestly, you could have dropped it and you would have lost nothing. If I was gonna put these films in order from least to greatest, I would start 1, then 3, 4, and then 2. I know I ranted and I raved about number 4 for about 18 to 20 minutes. But number 2 is a superior film. It's definitely a superior film. Overall, I would give all of these movies a solid A. This is an excellent franchise. Now there's exactly one good YA franchise adapted from a book out there. And it's an extraordinary set of films because it's based off of an extraordinary set of books. It proves that with enough money and care and time, movies can be made from this material to the point where they function as standalones and parts of a set. Overall, what would I give The Hunger Games? I'd probably give the entire series an 11 out of 12. 10 for part 1. 11 for... Sorry. Yeah, 11 for part 2. 10 for part 3. No, 11 for part 3. And 12 for part 4. There. It's literally the best series I've seen in a long time. In film, and television. And I'm glad to see it, and I hope to see more like it. Alright, so that was my review of the Hunger Games franchise. If you liked what you saw and you would like to see more, I can't promise that you're going to get a lot more. This is 4 reviews in one. Never done before. Maximum we've gotten up to is about 3 reviews in one. But please, do subscribe. Make me feel good. Oh, troll me in the comments. I love to see your comments. I know I only put out one of these videos a month. And to be quite honest, it's not enough. But my schedule's fairly busy. I got a job as an actual teacher, guys. So this is my way of release. Maybe I'll be able to make one of these a week. Hopefully I'll be able to go back to doing that. And we will begin again. But honestly, Hunger Games, awesome. Please like, please favorite, please share this and subscribe it. And remember, you guys are awesome. I'll see you in the next review.